just gonna wrap up the day. I'm gonna touch on quite a few things that everybody said. So I'm gonna touch on stuff from Victor, Renzo, and Luis, and add a little bit more. But the very, very, very first and most important thing we need to remember is, why are we doing a workshop like this? What is the objective of this kind of work? We are not against abortion. We are not against anything. We are pro. We are pro-life. We are not going to start a campaign to make abortion illegal again. That's not what we are here to do. Our job here is just to bring information of what Spiritism says and to remember to practice love and compassion. As we said, abortion is a crime, not in the sense of going to prison, in the sense of a mistake. We are breaking a divine law. So it's a mistake. Is there anybody here who has never made a mistake? Do we want to be judged and condemned for all of our mistakes? We don't. So love and compassion towards people who have been through this situation is key. We are not here to judge. We are not here to be against anything. We are here to be for life, pro-life. Because we do have a deeper and better understanding of the consequences, like Luis said. So because I know what could possibly happen in the spiritual side, in future lives, or even in this life, I make a choice not to make that mistake. If I know enough to maybe help someone avoid this mistake, that is great. So this is the objective of what we are doing here today, is to clarify, it's to bring knowledge and consolation and explain. Luis talked a lot about the possible consequences, and we are going to complete what he talked about the consequences with a piece about consolation. There is no mistake that is unforgivable. Nothing is unforgivable. No matter how big a mistake it is. God is love. Love is divine. So there is nothing that is unforgivable. Every mistake is forgivable. So let's start with a reflection. As a whole, does our society live in a conscious state of mind? Do you think so? Are we completely aware of the consequences of what we do? Spiritually speaking. Do you, and it includes me, feel like you live in full consciousness all the time? When and where does life start? And we talked about this here today, right? Does our society respect life? Truth is, I think everybody has seen this before, right? The iceberg. We can use this picture actually to help us have a visual of our conscious mind, which is the tip of the iceberg, right? People usually use this picture to talk about like your effort and your success, but we can use it to talk about our conscience. or a level of conscious or consciousness. So subconscious minds are still the majority. The whole, like Cesarina's case, enjoying life. Hedonism, do you guys know what hedonism is? It's when you live for pleasure. You're always looking for the next high, not high necessarily as drugs, but adrenaline. For some people, it's traveling. For some people, it's buying. For some people, it is drugs. It can be something different for everybody. But always looking for that next material thing that will bring us euphoria, because we confuse happiness with euphoria, right? Now, what is Spiritism's role in this whole thing? Question 799. In what way can Spiritism contribute to progress? How do you think Spiritism can contribute to progress? Hint, hint, I just mentioned in the beginning. That will come after. Consciousness will be part of the process. By destroying materialism. One of the sores, sores feridas, one of the sores of society. It enables people to comprehend where their true interests lie. Since the future life is no longer veiled by doubt, men and women will better understand that they can ensure their future based on the present. So the knowledge that Spiritism brings, that there is life after the death of the body. What happens? We have that in a lot of questions from the Spirit's book. We have the book Heaven and Hell that have so many cases of spirits who come to tell what happened to them. We have so many books by Emmanuel, André Luiz, Joana de Angelis, so many examples explaining to us what happens on the other side. So that knowledge, if we comprehend, because understanding cognitively, making sense with our brain, is it logic, is it not logic? That's the first step, that's easy. Comprehending is going the next step. It's not just in the brain, it's feeling. It's like, it's not that it just logical, it's not that it just makes sense. I can feel that is true. That resonates in me. That information really speaks to me. So when we go through that process, consciousness will come. Because again, we will understand that we can ensure our future based on the choices we make now. Right? Continuation of that answer. I am also moved with compassion for your miseries, your great weakness, not to extend a sure hand to those wayward unfortunates who, seeing heaven, fall into the abysses of error. Believe, love, and meditate upon the things that are being revealed to you. Do not mix tares with good seed, utopias with the truth. And this is spoken by none other than Jesus, Spirit of Truth. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, chapter 6, item 5. So, again, mixing the tares with the good seed, confusing euphoria with true happiness, which is that peace of mind of knowing that we did right for the right reasons. They are very different. So that's how Spiritism can help us evolve. Because by understanding the spiritual side, we understand that we can change our future by making better choices now. And how does Spiritism brings all that to our conscience? by promoting instruction and replacing ignorance with knowledge. And here comes the whole aggravating or attenuating circumstances. When a child does something wrong because they don't really understand cause and effect, what's going to happen, is different from someone who knows what's going to happen and still do it. Right? So if we replace that, oh, I had no idea, with the knowledge, then I am helping people awaken their conscience. But again, awakening our conscience is a completely individual and intransferable process. Nobody can do it for us. Not even the instruction, not even the knowledge can't do that for us. Because just knowing something doesn't mean we feel it and doesn't mean we exercise it in our lives. So, mind, heart, hands. Knowing, feeling, living what we know. Otherwise, it's just theory. Consoling the emotionally. That's, in the beginning, for me personally, Spiritism was just a religion that made sense. And that was great. But when you start studying more and understanding more, nowadays I can say that what the most beautiful thing in Spiritism is actually, wow, it's actually the consolation it brings. The knowledge that nothing is unforgivable. The knowledge that we will have as many chances as we need until we get it right.
Even in addition to that, when I was reading Caesarina, even when we are about to practice something, we're still being kind of shepherded, and they're giving the extra mile, everything the spiritual world can give us. So we are not desamparados. We're not.
Yeah.
I don't know how to say that.
Unsheltered.
Yeah. We're all. There's always. They're always there. It's just very. Even when you're going through something that's not the right path, they're there. We're being. It's consoled throughout. It's beautiful.
It is. We're supported all the time.
Yeah, it's not
yes.
only
Yeah. It's not just the knowledge that consoles. They are actually there for you, whether you feel it or know it or not.
Yeah.
Well, that starts with the whole, again, reading Missionários da Luz. That starts with how much preparation. And if we think about it again, if you read No Solar or any other book that talks about the process of a spirit being prepared to reincarnate, it's usually spirits who are above and spirits who could be living on a different planet or system because they are evolved enough for that. But because of love and compassion, just like Jesus said in that passage, because of our miseries, because we are still so unevolved, they stay behind to help us. It's so much love and compassion. By stimulating others to be a better being and stimulating ourselves to be a better being. Have we achieved that today? Today with the workshop, did we promote any kind of instruction? Consoling, we are going to talk a whole lot more about consoling during this presentation, but stimulating people to be a better being. So again, that's what all of these workshops are about. Right now we have 3 a year. That's what they are about. Bringing knowledge, instruction, stimulating people to understand more, to be better. Small changes in the way we think, trying to awaken our conscience, trying to realize a mistake that maybe in the past we didn't see as a mistake. All of these things help us be better people. And also learning what Spiritism has to say. And we are going to see something about the whole idea of eternal punishment and all that kind of stuff. So, again, going back to the previous presentation. So do we know what Spiritism says about abortion? Today we learned quite a bit. There is a whole lot more that we can't fit in just one day. And in the end, I have a list of recommended reading for anybody who wants to. But question 360 in the Spirit's book, Kardec asks, is it rational to treat a fetus, and by the way, it's spelled like this, but you can spell it just with an E or O-E. Is it rational to treat a fetus with the same respect as the body of a child who has already survived? Why that? Because as Vitor explained, for a lot of people, a human being only starts being a human being after they are out of the womb. So the question is it rational to treat a fetus with the same respect to treat a baby that you can hold in your hands? From what we learned here today? You should see the will of God and the divine handiwork in everything, and not treat lightly the things you ought to respect. Very straightforward. Everything follows according to God's designs, and no one is called upon to judge them. So yes, definitely yes. It's a life, and there's already a spirit attached to that. What's called fetus, we call baby. Does our society follow the divine laws? What do you think?
Yet. Some people say follow some countries, maybe. Some countries are doing more lines. Some
Depends on the
are.
countries. Follow few laws.
You're getting there.
Oh yeah, I love that answer. We're getting there. As we think about times, like historically speaking, we've been here for thousands and thousands of years. If you think that it's 2020, right? I think I'm still in the 80s. If you think that about 150 years ago, dwelling on the street with guns or swords was still legal, right? If you think of the Middle Ages, when it was completely okay to invade and kill your neighbor just to take their land, we have evolved a lot as a society. Human laws will continue to get closer to the divine laws, because we as humans will evolve and will slowly start to make them come close together. So we're getting there, exactly. In question 358, Kardec asks, is artificial abortion a crime regardless of the time of conception? And I believe we've seen that question already today. A crime is always committed when the law of God is transgressed. The mother or any other person involved, as Louise explained, always commits a crime upon taking the life of a child before its birth, because it prevents the soul from experiencing the trials for which the unborn's body was to have been the instrument. So again, when we think, sometimes it comes to my mind, my kids, it's not fair. So if we think about fair and unfair, it's taking away from a spirit that most of the time we have accepted to welcome as our child, either before we incarnate or during our incarnation. All of a sudden we say, no, not anymore. I know I agreed, but now I don't want it anymore. We are taking away their chance to experience life, to go through their own trials, to go through their own expiations, right? Do we want a chance to get things right? That spirit wanted a chance too. Do we know how big our unconsciousness is in terms of society? And this is also information that Vitor has already brought, so I'm just touching it again. Vitor said, globally, 25% of all pregnancies ended in abortion. I tried to find data from later, but I couldn't find. So this is the same slide that Peter brought. So 17 or younger, 2%. 18 to 24, 27%. 25 to 29, 28%. 30 to 34, 22. 35 plus, 21%. If you think that 1 in every 4 pregnancies ended in abortion, it's scary. It's very scary. Something else that I learned taking my course, every time you mention the word abortion here, because in Portuguese we say aborto natural and aborto provocado. We only have the word aborto. In English we have the word miscarriage, but sometimes Brazilians end up using the word abortion when they are talking about miscarriage. That's a very touchy subject, so we need to watch our language when we talk about this subject, because it's a very sensitive subject. And when we use the word abortion, for some Canadians it strikes a nerve, because we need to be careful. There's a difference between miscarriage and abortion. And we already learned that some abortions that are unconscious sometimes are mistaken for miscarriages, because it involves more than the material things that the medical team can see. What are the consequences of our unconsciousness? Like Luis just explained to us. So we can have physical diseases in this life or a few future ones, depending on how badly we damaged our perispirit. We will have spiritual consequences, such as obsessions and suicide. Why suicide? Why do you think? Anna talked about it, Luis talked about it. Why do you think an abortion leads to suicide?
If your life, I think, okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
You, what you say? Acho que é como se fosse você tirou uma vida, assim. Aí você vai tirar a sua vida. Não sei, acho que tem, não sei se tem alguma coisa relacionada. Assim,
Yeah, there would be an oversimplification, but because of guilt.
That's what I tried.
Yeah. So guilt might lead to depression.
Yeah.
To the feeling of unworthiness, and the final step, the final consequence of depression is self-annihilation, is when you try to destroy yourself by trying and sometimes committing suicide. Pain and suffering. Not because we want pain and suffering, but it's because it is going to be a natural consequence. A mistake doesn't make us happy. Understanding that we made a mistake and trying to repair that mistake, having the apprentice feeling, makes us happy, but not the mistake itself, right? So, and a mistake such as this one, which I think we can agree it is a big mistake, will eventually bring pain and suffering in a million possible and different ways. However, it will not bring happiness.
Interesting, because my grandma used to say on abortion can be more painful than birth. She used to say that, and just now I just wait, because it's not a physical pain, you know. You have all complex and psychological, and so that's she has a and she said,
for anybody who has given birth, it is a physical pain, but you know it's gonna end because that child's gonna be born. But yes, the pain of an abortion. If you fall into guilt, and we're gonna talk about this too, and sometimes the mother will already feel guilty, and with family members, or society in general, friends' judgment, it makes it even worse. Like Anna said, sometimes trying to be helpful, we can make it even worse. So we're going to talk about some of the things that we could do.
Yes, sometimes you don't want to, sometimes you need support, but you don't want to hear some some advice, some conversation. So they said, you give time, so to respect your moment, your
Yes,
situation.
sometimes people have the best intentions,
But they're wrong
but
way.
yeah, exactly. Right intention, wrong direction. So how does Spiritism comfort our society? Let's reflect again. And this one I got ipsis literis from yours, Anna. So how do I feel when I make a mistake? We already asked that question. Do we feel happy about the mistake itself? When we finally recognize it and try to make up for it, we feel happy that we're trying to do something about it. But we don't feel happy about the mistake itself. Is there eternal condemnation? Is there like the eternal burning hell? Which is an interesting concept, because at first the concept of hell was a frozen place. And then through time, it changed to a burning place. I don't know if you guys knew that. No. But in the beginning, the concept of hell was a frozen place. Oh, really? Yes. And then through time, it changed it to burning. Having lived both in Brazil and in Canada, I don't know what's worse.
That's good.
We've experienced both ends. But is there eternal condemnation even in a frozen or burning hell? Can I fix my mistakes? How can I fix? Because answering yes is easy. But how and when? Do I have the right to judge others?
Do I have the right to judge myself?
Yeah.
Actually, you know what? Yeah.
That's the question, right?
If you look at the question, it's a tricky question. Do I have the right? The right I have. I can do whatever I want. Should I? I do have the right to judge others and myself. But the real question is, should I judge myself and others? Right? Self-forgiveness or guilt? Which feeling helps a person to improve? A whole lot of people think that is guilt. A whole lot of people think that if you don't feel guilty, it's because you are unconscious.
You feel guilty.
Anybody conscious will feel guilty.
Condemn
Yeah.
yourself, okay, I'm paying my sentence, so that's okay.
That's
The idea,
No, yeah, doesn't work like that.
the idea that suffering is
It's-
the redemption. That suffering is not, if we're not learning, if we're not improving.
Just
That's why the hell seems to be eternal.
you don't want to work actually when you do that. You just want to be there and suffering, and that's
Some people bring this from so many past incarnations with that idea that suffering is making up for your mistakes. And we are going to see what makes up for your mistakes, and it's definitely not suffering. Suffering is a natural consequence of the mistake, but it's not what fixes it.
Not too long, and I myself, I feel like that. So it's just a change. Slowly, few years, just a few years, but for a long time, I think they feel guilty and this process and feel pain. That's what's gonna make my salvation. That's what we learn from.
And it's not just in this life, Nelma. We've been bringing this from how many centuries ago.
Even
So
though
it's a concept, it's an idea that we slowly need to change the way we think.
That means like it's a long process for once, like it's, as you said, each one has your path.
Exactly.
Some
We all have our own speed, our own path,
exactly.
our own mission.
Yeah.
So, the passage of Jesus and the woman taken in adultery. Everybody knows that one, right? So Jesus sat down in the temple to teach some of the people after he spent the previous night at the Mount of Olives. A group of scribes and Pharisees, you know scribes and Pharisees? Yeah. Confront Jesus, interrupting his teaching session. Because they loved challenging him, right? They kept waiting for the moment he was gonna say something. They kept testing Jesus because they wanted Jesus to say something that they would say. You're saying something against the law, against Moses' law. You can't. You're not Jewish. You're saying something against Moses' law. So they kept testing. Yes, they would have something against him. They kept testing him, but he's Jesus, right? They bring in a woman accusing her of committing adultery, claiming she was caught in the very act. There was no question about it. You guys know what the law is for adulterous women? At the time?
Yeah.
And in some countries still? Stone. Stone them to death. So, again, and that is in the Mosaic law. Mosaic law, not divine law. They asked Jesus whether the punishment for someone like her should be stoning as prescribed by Mosaic law. Moses said, stone adulterous women. And then they asked Jesus, so what do we do now? So if Jesus says yes, then it's not all the love he's been professing. If Jesus says no, he's going against Mosaic law. How does Jesus get out of that one? Jesus first ignores the interruption and writes on the ground as though he does not hear them. But when the woman's accusers continues their challenge, he states that the one who is without sin is the one who should cast the first stone. What was he writing on the floor? Because here it says, Jesus ignores the interruption and writes on the ground. What was he writing on the ground? He was writing the sins of the men who were accusing the woman. He was writing the sins of the men who were accusing the woman. And then he says, so one who is without sin is the one who should cast the first stone. Their sin, a few of their sins were written right there on the ground. What do? The accusers and congregants depart, leaving Jesus alone with the woman. Jesus asks the woman if anyone has condemned her. She answers that no one has condemned her. And what does Jesus do? He says that he too does not condemn her and tells her to go and sin no more. I don't know if you know, but the word sin in Aramaic actually means to miss the target. Basically, make a mistake. To sin is to make a mistake. So he says, go and sin no more. Go and make no more mistakes of this kind, probably. If Jesus does not condemn us, why do we condemn ourselves and each other? This is in the Gospel of John, chapter 8, starts in verse 11. So, judgment, punishment. Question 1000 in the Spirit's book. Can we redeem our faults in our present life? What do you think? All of them? Can I get an express ticket to the next best planet?
Chances are
Yeah.
Tickets are
but
limited.
you can. You can do some, you can start.
Go fast and grab yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't hear anybody say yes.
Yeah.
So why?
Yes.
No, it's possible.
Not all.
Yeah, it's possible, but it depends much more about yourself, the force that you put into, how much effort you put into, and you are able to. But it's very rare, those that get
All.
all
And-
of them.
And
Extremely.
redeeming is a process too. So we start and then we.
Thank you, Anna. That's where I was going. Redeeming ourselves is a process, right? And it's not about the anxiety of making up for every single mistake ever. Right? I need to fix this. I need to fix this. Like Anna said, it's a process of bettering ourselves. And this is why it's so rare. How can we develop patience overnight? How can we develop serenity overnight if we've been struggling with that for so many centuries? So again, no one size fits all. My mother says that always and never are both too long. So, not saying never, impossible, but extremely rare, because again, it's a process. It takes us time. It's not a formula that we figure out, solve the equation, and boom, we're done. It's developing it. It's truly feeling and acting like it. So, what does the Spirit say? Yes, by making amends for them. God does not value a fruitless repentance that is easily completed and costs no more than a mere smiting of the chest. Here, what they are talking about is mistakes I made here. Mistakes I made here, can I fix them here? Yes, by making amends for them. And then you say, well, but why then we have consequences for future lives in the case of abortion? Why?
So we might not be able to go through as you talk about the process might take longer.
Yes, and because it was not just feelings involved. We damage our per-spiritual body, and our per-spiritual body needs to heal. So that's the difference. We're not just talking about, I fought with Soninha, we haven't spoken for 5 years, how can I make amends in that situation? It's just feelings involved. But when we're talking about an abortion, we're talking about damage to our per-spiritual body. So that's why we will have consequences.
Well, and that spirit that we have aborted is not necessarily here. We might receive them again as children or
Exactly.
family members or so. We can make amendment. We can do good to repair that mistake.
Yeah.
But not all situations.
Sometimes, yeah. Sometimes it leads to infertility. You can't have children again in this incarnation. So for you to come with that person, that spirit again, it might take another life. So it's more factors involved in the equation. Okay? So continuing the answer. The loss of a small finger while doing good for others erases more wrongdoing than any amount of self-inflicted torture undergone solely for one's self-interest. Wow, let's understand this. First of all, we're not telling anybody to cut their small fingers. Okay? This is just a figure of speech. This is just a metaphor. So what he's saying is, the loss of a small finger, figuratively speaking, while you're doing good for others, erases more wrongdoing than any amount of self-inflicted torture, guilt. Back 106 years ago, it was very common for some religions self-inflicted injuries as a way to pay for their sins. That was a very common practice. So by hurting your body physically, there was the belief that you were making amends, that you were making up for your mistakes. So this is what they're talking about here. So self-inflicted torture undergone solely for one's self-interest. So again, I fought with Soninha, I feel guilty, I feel horrible, I'll hurt myself, so I am even with her. I don't care how she feels. I don't care about Soninha. It's my self-interest. I want to make up for my mistake. I'm even with God. I don't have to do anything anymore. That's not the idea. So that's why the spirits say the loss of a small finger while doing good for others is way better than self-inflicted injury or guilt, just so I can feel better regardless of anybody else involved. And this is the key. Wrongdoing can only be atoned by doing good. It doesn't get any simpler than that. I can only make amends, I can only make up for a mistake by doing good. It's not by feeling guilty. It's not by judging myself, condemning myself, hurting myself, killing myself. None of that will make up for the mistake. None of that will atone for the mistake. What will is doing good. And doing good can take so many forms, right? We have all seen, for example, cases of mothers who have aborted or have lost a child and end up adopting I don't know how many. That's a way of doing good. Doing good has infinite shapes and forms. It can be doing good to others, but we need to remember that love starts with self-love. We can't give what we don't have. So it starts with us, and then we offer. And attempts at making amends are worthless if they affect neither one's pride nor one's material interests. So we go back to the self-inflicted injury so I can feel that I'm forgiven, right? My pride is still intact because I don't care about Soninha. I am not going to humiliate myself and ask Soninha for forgiveness. No way. I will hurt myself and that will be enough. This is worthless, right? This is completely worthless. Does it make sense to everybody? Yes?
Because it goes through recognizing the mistake.
Exactly, and that's where the pride part comes, right? Because somebody who is prideful, do they admit they make mistakes? It's always someone else's fault, right? It wasn't me, it was Soninha, she started.
She's so difficult. That's why I did that thing to her.
Soninha makes me mad.
That's
How often do we say that?
You're taking out my patience.
I try so hard, but
You're making me angry. Luis is making me annoyed. It's so easy to just transfer, right?
I'm so good girl, I'm a good person, but she's a
Right? Yeah, I'm a great person. Just don't step on my toes.
There was just a cute.
Not with that rule. Nobody.
This Friday at the school I work at, so the kids got a fun lunch. So that day was a smoothie, like those drinks. So this little girl, she's like, Miss Anna, I can't drink it anymore. This one is making me puke. The smoothie was making her puke.
Yeah, it wasn't her having too much.
And I just made it kind of funny, like, oh, so is this cup of smoothie has arms and legs, and I had telling you, puke, 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 puke. And she started laughing. I know it's not the same, but I just reminded me of her.
No, but it is. It's something that like very. It starts very early, and I see that with family life. We see that in family life. I don't know how many times I caught myself saying, "You are making me angry. You are making me lose my patience." I don't know how many times.
I think we still do. You don't even realize all the times you do it.
Everybody does that. No, everybody.
But then again, we go through the process of first recognizing. First step.
Self-love, self-compassion too, and then love and compassion.
Yes.
Yeah. We are short on time, but I can tell you.
After?
Yeah, after I can tell you what happened this week at home. But it was a similar situation because I keep saying I am not making you mad, you're choosing to be mad, and I heard that back.
Yeah.
So
Well, they're learning.
where does this one go? Pride goes out the window, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so in the book, and talking about self-forgiveness, in the book Love, Unbeatable Love, Amor Imbatível Amor, by Joana de Angelis, psychographed by Divaldo Franco, Joana says, the undiluted guilt, undiluted meaning concentrated, so the concentrated guilt tears the being, whether consciously or not, imposing the need to repair the damage caused. For this reason, the forgiveness of the wrongdoing is of relevant importance. So what happens is, consciously or not, we feel the need to repair. So what happens is that sometimes the way we try to repair is through guilt, self-punishment, self-judgment, self-sentencing, self-condemnation, and so on. Because it's our unconscious or subconscious way of trying to repair the damage. Because deep down, our conscience is telling us that it was wrong and that we need to repair. So the repair is necessary, but sometimes we don't know how, right? So we need forgiveness for the wrongdoing, but how do we get that forgiveness? Not only to those who attack, accuse, or slander, but also and especially him or herself. It is indispensable that the individual allow him or herself the right of error, considering, however, the duty of reparation, through whose effort he or she overcomes the embarrassment that the conscience of the equivocation imposes on him. At a certain level, conscious or not, we feel the embarrassment. And that's what makes us feel like we need to repair, because we know it was wrong. Even if it's in a subconscious level, we know. That causes the embarrassment. That embarrassment or that feeling of inadequacy is what's going to prompt us to try and fix it. The wrong way of fixing is the guilt, self-judgment, lack of self-love, trying to punish ourselves, thinking that that is the reparation. This is not a permissive attitude to new mistakes. So when she talks here about it's indispensable that the individual allow him or herself the right of error. And then again, we need to balance things, right? Because there is guilt and there's excuse. There's the, I'm the worst person of the world, and there's the, not my fault. She started, he started.
Perfection and negligence.
Yes, perfection and negligence. Everything is my fault, nothing is my fault. So that's what she's saying here. This is not a permissive attitude to new mistakes. It's like, I'm human, I make mistakes, whatever. Not even gonna try hard. But a right of being human to achieve success or misfortune in their undertakings, learning through experimentation. So again, it's a learning experience. Not guilt, not excuse, not perfection, not negligence. Learning experience. Not making a mistake on purpose and not feeling the worst human being in the world if we make a mistake. Just understanding what the mistake was, seeing as a learning opportunity. Do I want to make that mistake again? No, I'll do better next time. So it's an opportunity to learn, right?
That's aligned to the apprentices feeling virtue, right?
Mm-hmm.
We are bound to make mistakes yet, but
We
the
are at that
more
level.
we learn through experimentation, we'll hopefully make better choices next
Yes.
time. And
It's going to be a natural process, right? Making fewer mistakes is going to become a natural process as we start to reflect more on our actions. Making mistakes is going to slowly go away. How does Spiritism comfort our society? So, we've seen this so many times, we've seen this already today, and we're continue seeing that for as long as I shall live. Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 to 30. Come to me, all you who are exhausted and overloaded, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. So that's the invitation from Jesus, to follow his directions, to follow him as a model, to model his virtues, right? To model how he abided by or fulfilled God's laws, right? He didn't just tell us how, he showed us how. He didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk, literally, because they had no cars, they had to walk. And there was a donkey here and there. So finding comfort in ourselves. So again, everything starts with the self, right? Willingness to recognize our weaknesses in order to transmute or change them gradually, slowly. Nobody has to change overnight. Any change overnight is not real. It's a mess. It's us wanting to change because it's fake. Yeah, because these changes happen gradually, right? So that's the first thing. We need to be willing to recognize. So don't fall into the excuse. Nothing is my fault. Identify these weaknesses. I know I have a hard time being patient. I know I have a hard time waiting. I know I have a hard time being calm. I have road rage. So, identifying our weaknesses. What virtues do we need to work on the most? And how do we figure that out? It's usually the one we're more tested on, right? The one you're more tested on is usually the one you need to work on the most. Realize the impacts these weaknesses are having on our feelings and behavior. Am I aggressive because of my inability to remain calm? Do I make rash and bad decisions because of my anxiety? So, realizing how these weaknesses impact our lives, right? Then initiate the efforts to change through the process of loving, self-welcoming, self-embracing. In Portuguese, we say autoacolhimento. There isn't a word in English that means the same thing. So it's embracing ourselves, welcoming ourselves, saying, I am an apprentice. I am allowed to make mistakes. It's not a permissive thing. I'm learning from this experience. Okay? The loving self-welcoming is the result of the practice of 5 fundamental virtues. So in order to practice that self-embracing, self-welcoming, there are 5 virtues in the process. Self-love, no question about it. I can't embrace myself if I don't love myself. Self-acceptance. I accept myself the way I am right now. Oh, there will be 5, Carla. Hold on. There are 3 more. So, self-acceptance. Accepting myself as I am. Because sometimes we catch ourselves being very unaccepting. Like, I can't be anxious. I have to be calm. I have to change. I have to not yell at people when I'm driving. So,
tomorrow.
So self-acceptance, accepting that we are the way we are right now, and we have the potential to be so much more. Exactly, as I am temporarily and not as my permanent being. That's such a hard concept to transfer to English. Self-confidence. I need to trust myself. I need to trust that I can do better next time. Because sometimes we're like, oh, I never learn. I'll never be able to do this. So we need to have that self-confidence that, yes, we can improve. We can do better.
Because God trusts us.
Exactly. So if God is for us, who's against us? If He trusts and loves us, why don't we? Self-valorization, right? Knowing our worth. We are worth it. Again, if God thinks we're worth it, if He puts us here, that's because we are worth it. We are worthy of our own evolution. We are worthy of love. We are worthy of attention. We are worthy of every good thing that comes towards us. And self-respect. Both physically, emotionally, spiritually. Respect our own limits, physically speaking, even emotionally speaking. Sometimes we want to be part of a group that we don't have a lot of affinity with. It's like not the same, frequency. We're disrespecting ourselves. Like, I don't feel like drinking, but all my friends drink wine. I have to. That's disrespect with my own self, disrespect with my body, and even with my conscience if I know it's not good for me. So self-respect, extremely important when we want to embrace ourselves, because it ties to everything else, to knowing our worth, right? Going back to the whole situation. So I have a friend who committed abortion or who had a miscarriage. What can we do? How can we help in the whole consolation process? Like Anna said, sometimes even trying to give that person a spiritist knowledge of, oh, you were helping a spirit, you were going through a trial. Many times, that doesn't help, because that can sound like and can actually be a judgment, even if we don't think it is. We have to be so careful with judgment, with condemnation, with being against what people do. We are free to do everything we want, and we make our own choices. Everybody else is allowed to do the same. Doesn't matter if we agree or not. It's important to respect, not judge, and we are here to love and be compassionate, not to be the judges of ourselves or anybody else. So, one of the possibilities, we can educate about the doctrine of the Spirit, what the doctrine of the Spirits explains about abortion. Preferably not the part about all the possible consequences, but the part about consolation, about no suffering is eternal. Nobody's going to suffer forever. God is loving. It doesn't even make sense to say that God is love and think that anybody would suffer forever. It's not even rational, right? So talk about the consolation Spiritism brings. Listen, sometimes the person just needs somebody who will listen instead of somebody who will lecture. Non-judgment. Again, we don't remember our past lives. We might have done the same or even worse. Who are we to judge? Help thinking about options. For example, somebody who is pregnant and is thinking about abortion. Maybe we can help that person brainstorm what are the options. Like, how can having that child work? That's one thing we can do. Are there resources in the community to help mothers, children, fathers, and family? And Anna did this lecture last year, and she said that there is a school here in Calgary for teenage mothers that have child care for their babies. So there are resources. Maybe we just need to help that person. Sometimes when you are in a bind, when you are in a situation that causes you panic, you can't think clearly. So sometimes we can just help that person think clearly. We can help them see more options, and that might help them change their minds, right?
Peter brought in his first lecture all the resources that only in Calgary we have.
Right? So we do, and again, sometimes when we panic, we just become blind, deaf, and dumb, and we can't move.
We don't see a solution.
Yes, exactly. We just panic. So one of the ways to help is maybe help that person brainstorm what is available. And finally, foolproof. How do I want to be treated? How do I like to be treated? Do I like to be judged? Then I'm not going to judge. Just treat everybody the way you would like to be treated. Right? And how do we access our conscience? Spirit's book, question 880. Which is the first of all the natural rights of humans? That's exactly how this started this morning. And that's the name of our workshop. The right to live. And therefore no one has the right to take the life of his fellow creature or to do anything that may compromise his personal existence. So again, an abortion is impeding, is stopping another spirit from having their chance at reincarnation. We are having ours, right? Having a child means we're giving another spirit a chance to improve themselves, just like we're trying hard to improve ourselves. And here's a little list. So like I said, contos e apólogos, texto 39, material. I only you left in Portuguese, I translated just cause. Just because that's what I do. Okay. Yep, my thing is telling me. Oh yeah. So looking at this, it's kind of hard to ignore, right? It's not just a bunch of cells. There is a spirit attached to that baby or fetus or body. And again, our role is not to judge or to be against or anything like that. It's the opposite. It's to be pro-life, for life. And that's what we're here to do. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
One thing I think has been mentioned before, but when we bring examples of what happened, it's again not to judge those people, but it's to help ourselves to, by others' mistakes, we may not need to go through that kind of experience to learn. We could start learning or learn from other people's mistakes too. So that's also another way that those spirits communicate, and they just want to help too, to bring those experiences So hopefully we don't have to suffer that same.
Thank you so much for that, Anna. Thank you so much. Because, that's what happens with us and our parents, right? When they tell us, I've been through this is not how you're doing, like, you don't know anything.
Yeah.
But we're not teenagers anymore. At this point, we already know that our parents did know what they were talking about. And it's the same thing. These spirits come to share all of this information, stories, cases, examples, exactly because we can learn from their mistakes. We don't have to make the same mistakes. The whole literature tells us some of the possibilities. We don't have to make the same mistake. We can learn from theirs. And it is very generous of them to share with us so that we can take advantage of that. Thank you very much. That was fantastic. Thank you. All right. More questions, comments? No? I think we can close with our final prayer. Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry we went over time, but that usually happens with me. I apologize. Trying to get better. Are you gonna? Our VJ is fast. Well, you're doing quite a few things at the same time. So let's close our eyes. Take a deep breath. And thank our Master, Jesus. Thank our guardian angels, the mentors of our house, for bringing us together here today to talk about such a sensitive subject. Thank you so much to all the spirits who contribute to our learning by sharing their knowledge, their own experiences. And we ask you, Lord Jesus, to give us strength to help us be conscientious, be aware of ourselves, of everyone around us. We thank you for the opportunity to be here, incarnated, alive, for having the opportunities that sometimes we see as trials, as problems in our daily lives, but that are golden and precious in our learning process. We thank our guardian angels for working so hard for us, all of our family spirits who give us support, who try to steer us in the right direction. Please enlighten us, protect us, and help us help other people around us who might need an ear to listen to them, a shoulder for them to cry on, who might need our love and our compassion. Give us strength not to judge and to treat everybody around us, regardless of who they are, the very same way we would like to be treated.